Hey Jay,
Hey, Natalie.
how are you doing this morning?
I'm fantastic. You know why?
Tell me.
This is our actual first recording since I got back from my vacation.
Oh my God, I bet you're still jet lagged. Let's see, it's 7:47 a.m. where we're recording, and so that means it must be
Oh,
7 47
where I
p.m.
was.
in
I'm
the
almost ready for bed.
Oh my gosh. I hope don't fall asleep on Xander.
I'm
There's
gonna.
not, you know what? It's not even possible to fall asleep on him
I,
because
I'm I'm
he's
I'm
so
depending on that.
wonderful. Just saying.
But I am excited, so I'm feeling all chatty.
Do
So
it.
Xander has been warned.
Yeah. Hey, hey, you know what? People love to hear about your vacation. It was 30 days, people. That's
Okay,
ridiculous.
I'm done.
But let's not talk about your vacation.
No,
Let's talk about what we're here to talk about today, and that's
I
Xander.
it is, and today's guest is fantastic. His
I
name
love
is
him.
Zander Keig. He is an award-winning speaker, educator, author, and founder of Keig Consulting. Okay, I got Xander's biography, and I love self-description. So Xander, this is read word for word. This description. He
Oh,
says, "I'm a 50-something-year-old first-generation American of Mexican heritage." I say 50-something as well, Xander, so that's fine.
I think we both know
Post
she's in her 50s.
Sorry, a post-transition transsexual man, a Coast Guard veteran, a childhood TBI survivor, a
Mm.
neurodivergent first-generation college graduate, and the primary caregiver of an elderly veteran father living with dementia. You got a lot going on, Xander.
Mm.
Xander definitely has a caregiving story, and he's used it to build support and awareness for LGBTQ family caregivers. And that's not been out there for quite a while. And so we're excited to hear about
Mm.
it. From the early signs of his father being scammed out of $1,800 on Facebook to moving his dad in and caring for his dementia while working from home during COVID to ultimately moving his dad to a facility that could meet his needs, this story is filled with pieces that touch us all. So get ready, buckle your seatbelts. Xander, we are
Mm.
so happy to have
Woo!
you here with us this morning.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And just I must have missed a zero because my father was scammed out of $18,000.
What?
$18,000
I
Oh,
hate
there was
on
those
a zero
people.
Facebook.
off
I
that.
hate those people. I just feel like you need to know that. I hate those people. Like, get a
Oh
real
my
job.
gosh.
Yep.
Go
There
pay
was a
taxes like
zero.
the
Oh,
rest of us.
I missed the zero then. I missed something because I saw 1,800, 18,000. I'd be fired up right now,
Oh,
Xander.
let me
That
tell you
is,
something. I'd be cutting somebody, Jay.
yeah, that's true. Okay, well, let's
Well,
get,
as you
yeah.
as you might imagine, when my father first told me about what was going on, I was sitting with my dad and my wife. We were having brunch at a restaurant in San Diego, California, where we all used to live. And as he was telling me this story, it was just sort of so casually coming out of his mouth. And I had to just remind myself, stay calm, don't overreact. He doesn't understand what's happened.
No.
And I could tell immediately that it was a scam, but he thought it was just a friend helping him with something. And so I
Mm.
had to
Oh,
stay very calm and ask him, questions, very open-ended questions to try and elicit as much information as I could to know how bad it was.
Mm.
I think I was probably holding hands with my wife under the table, like, oh my God, this is terrible.
oh my
Jesus, take the
gosh.
wheel.
Well,
It was
and
Jesus, take the wheel.
this is kind of jumping forward, but I do since we're talking about it.
I don't even
So
care.
you said your dad, when I was reading about this event, which is now 10 times as bad as I thought it was, your dad had always been really conscientious about things like that. So in addition to the amount, though, you were really surprised that this has happened to him. But had you noticed stuff because your dad suffers from dementia? Had you noticed stuff before, or this was like the red alarm? Oh my gosh, something's going on with dad.
This was it. This was the moment that I realized that somehow, some way, my father was not capable of recognizing that he was being scammed. Because you're right, he was very conscientious about the company he kept, his business dealings. He was a very smart man. He wasn't a college graduate, excuse me, but he was very learned on his own. He was well
Yeah,
read. He traveled the world. My father was not stupid. He wasn't
yeah.
gullible.
Hmm.
He was not somebody that could easily be taken advantage of. So I knew that when he said, this is what it was. He said to me, I said, Dad, how have you been this week? And he said, better than last week. And instead
Mm.
of letting it go, that was a very unusual thing for my father to say.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, what's different this week from last week? And he said, well, all the gift cards last week. And I said, oh, what gift card? And then it just went from there. Like, if I hadn't been paying attention, if I would have just went, oh, that's good, and moved on. Most people aren't paying as close attention, but I think just my upbringing and also my social work training, I'm trained to pay attention to things that are out of sort,
That's right.
even when they're really minimal like that. It was just a way of speaking that my father didn't speak.
Yeah. Wow. That's hard. And you say your social work background's in there, but I will say sometimes it is hard, especially when you're day in and day out with someone that's older and you hear that, you're always talking about the weather or someone's died. And so sometimes you are dismissive. And that's a good reminder that you do need to be attentive, because if they do say something and it does catch you, you really need to not say, okay, that's good. Oh, okay. And I know I do sometimes when I'm talking to mom on the phone and I'll take big blame for it. And that you caught it. It was like gift cards in itself is a terrifying thing. So I know Natalie's had a little experience of that with her company of people buying gift cards.
We totally did. Bought it for the CEO. And I'm just like, and the part, and the sad part is people that don't have, some limitations. It's fact that common sense you would think would prevail, but these people are very skilled at selling, which again, still kind of pisses me off that they do not take those talents and use them elsewhere and pay taxes on it. So I just think that's terrible. So
how old was your dad then, Zander, at that time?
78 or 79.
Oh,
they're also bullies because they were doing a lot of this through text. It started on Facebook, but then it moved to text because my dad had to take photographs of the front and back of each gift card.
Oh.
And it wasn't just gift cards. It was 9,000 in gift cards and 9,000 straight out of his checking account.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So the texting, I said, oh, let me see your phone. Let me just see. I was just very casual about it. Oh, let me see. And I could see in the texts that were being sent from this person, or these people were in all caps with lots of exclamation points, lots of question marks. So it was like a bullying tactic. Like they were yelling at my dad. Like there was a sense of urgency and, don't slow down. It was so alarming. I just took a bunch of screenshots. I contacted the sheriff's department. It was and Facebook and the bank.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's absolutely, I'm just sitting here saying, I'm like, there's a couple of little nuggets that I took away in there. It was like, be calm. Especially with the person, your loved one, because here's the thing, I know that if that happened to mom would be mortified, number one, that she'd been taken, even and your dad didn't understand, but he's also a pleaser too, and he doesn't want to disappoint you. So if you're not calm, it's going to dysregulate him and make things probably even worse. And so I think that let's be calm, let's figure it out, let's not and then let me ask you this, Zander, is there any safeguards after you notified the bank and the police and all that, is there any safeguards that the phone company that you could put on your dad's phone to make sure that would kind of divert that or notify you? Or does the bank say, hey, we're not going to allow for certain transactions to be anything that they said you could have done this, do this differently moving forward?
Unfortunately, there was very little help from the various agencies that I reached out to. It was one of those things where, there's not much we can do about it. We'll take a report. So on Facebook, I went into my father's Facebook and I sent off a notification to the internal Facebook, team that deals with fraud, and said, this is the person. And the thing is that the way they do it is pretty masterful, because the Facebook page that they commandeered was a longtime friend of my father. So he trusted that this was a friend of his. And then at the time, the most heartbreaking piece of it for me was that my father was trying to do something for me. So the way it was sold to him was, we're going to give you this big chunk of money, but you have to give us this little chunk of money up front. before we can release it to you. It's like a little processing fee. And
Mhm.
he said, all I wanted to do was help you pay off your student loan.
Oh,
Oh,
And so that got me because he knew that, the amount of debt that I was in with my student loans back in that time, and was a daunting, for me. I thought I'd go to my grave with student loans, and he was wanting to help me. And then he got scammed out of $18,000. It
that
made
hurts my
me
heart.
even angrier.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that upsets me. Okay. We got lost in that. That upsets me. So I gotta figure that
We
out.
hate you, and if we find you, we're
If
gonna.
we find you, Facebook person, that's very upsetting. Okay, so Xander, we really got into this financial portion. We're gonna have some sort of session on helping out with that, because
No
I do
kidding.
hate when people take advantage, especially like my mom and stuff.
Yeah.
So okay, should we jump
Let's
back, Natalie? Let's go back to
let's
okay. You were born, or because you're
let's
in San
start.
Diego, Florida. You've been
Well,
like around. You've got all
and
kinds
number
of
one, I always like to say this: thank you for your service.
yes.
Thank you for your service, because we love our veterans, we love our military, and your dad was also military,
Yes.
Mhm.
Marine
and
Corps. I was in the
so
Coast Guard. He was in the Marine Corps.
yeah. So I think it's kind of like we're going to start from the beginning and kind of move forward, because you hear dad, mom in the
My
picture.
mom passed away in 2000. My parents were divorced when I was 2. So
Okay.
I was raised by my father as a single
Yeah.
parent.
Okay. 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 So moving forward, so you had a military bring up, and so you decided, so you thought, okay, I'm going to follow that path too, right? So kind of walk us a little bit forward, and then jump into like where, like, the big thing that hits, and where does our care start?
So my father and his 4 older brothers were all born in Mexico,
Mhm.
and my grandmother decided to send them to the United States for school. So
Mhm.
once they hit certain ages, they would be sent over to a boarding school in Texas in a town called Brownsville.
Mhm.
And so, and then as they became of age, 17, 18 years old, they all went into the military. So I had my oldest uncle, Edward, went into the Marine Corps. My 3 other uncles, Victor, David, and Saven, went into the Army. And then my father went into the Marine Corps. And
Wow.
so, yes, all my uncles were in the military. And so I grew
Wow.
up around that. None of my uncles retired from the military, except for my uncle David, who medically retired because he developed a heart condition. But
Mhm.
most of them did, 1 tour, which is 4 years, or maybe 2 or 3,
Yeah.
but none of them did the full
Right.
retirement tour. And my father did 4 years in the Marine Corps. So it's like, yes, I was brought up by somebody who had been in the Marine Corps, but my father, interestingly enough, he wasn't gung-ho
Mhm.
Marine.
Mhm.
When I was being raised, my father was into very esoteric things like Gestalt and going to the Esalen
Yeah.
retreat center in Big Sur, and going to men's discussion groups or consciousness raising groups. And he
Mm.
worked as a trainer for a training system called EST, lower E, lower S, lower T, for Earhart Systems Training, I believe it stands for. So he
Mhm.
was into this human potential, human actualization. And he was an engineer. So he had this really interesting, like, left brain, right brain.
Mm.
He was doing yoga and meditation. So I was raised in this kind of, I don't know, strict, but also kind of hippie, you know?
It's like ultimate Zen.
I
You're
was
like, all
It
thinking
was,
right.
Zen was the word I was thinking,
yeah,
Jay, that I was
yeah.
like, that feels super zenny
Yeah, you're
for a
like, your dad is way
Marine.
ahead of his time,
Like,
Xander. I
no
mean, he's like,
kidding.
ah,
Yeah,
Like,
he really, for my 12th birthday, my father took me to the Transcendental Meditation Center, and my 12th birthday present was getting my mantra.
hey, ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the US and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
So, I mean, and he got me, books like Mindfulness or Meditation for the Teenager, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Like, this is how I grew up. When I was like 10, 11, 12, my father would bring me along to these trainings and have me speak to people. He'd put me up on stage and have me speak to people. And then they developed children's seminars. So my dad would sign me up for like a all 2-day, seminar with these, Hollywood actors who were leading them. It was such an interesting time.
Wow.
My dad would take me to the Unitarian Universalist Church. And so I was learning all about different kinds of religions around the world and transcendentalism and American Stoicism, like through Emerson and Thoreau. So it was interesting because, he was a Mexican man. So there's a cultural component to it.
Mhm, mhm.
He was a Marine. And so there was that kind of component to it, but he was really into all of these,
Wow.
funky, artsy, hippie kind of alternative things. And yeah, I loved it.
See, I mean, it sounds like he's a seeker of knowledge. So do you think that's kind of through your life, you've always just been seeking more, and that's kind of how that got embedded in you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. My mother is similar. I just didn't grow up with my mother, but I spent time with her. I visited with her. My mother did psychic readings and owned a shop in San Diego, California that sold like tarot cards and candles. Right. So, and she was a minister with something called the Spiritualist Church. Right. So my parents were definitely, that very alternative
Okay,
style.
you were like the cool kid.
Break one. Okay. So this sounds really interesting. Do you think that this is what pushed you into um going, because you said mindfulness, and I'm a social worker too. We're both social workers, and I don't know what JJ is. She's just getting over jet lag. And so so um so I do you think this pushed you into social work? And you think that's what kind of made you a social butterfly, considering social work? I mean, would you say that? Would you like, do you think that pushed you in your direction, like in your career path?
You know, Becoming a social worker happened
Okay.
later in life for me. I went from being in the military to law enforcement.
Mm.
And when I left law enforcement, then I pivoted into basically it being, how would I say it? I pivoted into doing more alternative things. So I went to school to become a massage therapist. I took a part-time job at a natural food store. I began teaching cooking lessons on how to veganize your favorite recipes at a local Unitarian Universalist church in San Diego. So I I guess I was following somewhat in the path of my father, except for he was doing both the engineering and the more alternative or esoteric stuff simultaneously. I kind of went from doing one thing, right, military, law enforcement, to like now I'm going to do massage and work in a natural food store and teach, vegan cooking
Mm.
classes.
Yeah.
So I did them in succession rather than simultaneously.
Yeah.
And then after that, then things started to blend together. And I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do as a next career.
Hmm.
I thought about being a lawyer, so I took the LSAT and I went to law school for a short period of time, and I realized it was too much like the law enforcement experience, and so I left law school. And I was wondering, what am I going to do? And my wife and I met in seminary. So I have a master's in theology. My wife has a master's in divinity. And she had gone into chaplaincy, which I thought was really very beautiful,
Hmm.
work, and then became a marriage and family therapist. And so when she was looking at what she was going to do after her chaplaincy training, and she thought about doing the LMFT program, I started looking into, oh, maybe I could do something like that. So I looked into psychology and marriage and family therapy and licensed professional counselor, mental health counselor, drug and alcohol counselor, and social work. And the way I made my decision about which occupation I was going to go to was I read the Code of Ethics.
Mm. True.
And I loved the Code of Ethics for social work because I liked that our emphasis was working with the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed. I liked the kind of work that social workers do. Doing psychotherapy is not a standard social work career.
Yeah.
trajectory. It happens, but mostly we do case management and discharge planning, and we work in schools and prisons and with people in child welfare and adult welfare. So
Yeah.
I've barely done psychotherapy as a
Me
practice.
neither. No
I've
one would pay me, Xander.
I tried it. I did try it for a year and a half with a very small, I had 7 clients and I
Mhm.
enjoyed it. But if I had to do that for a full-time basis, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I want to, because you and I could go into social work fun all the time. So I want to kind of steer us back. So you're doing all these cool things, right? And your life is going this really kind of cool. And your dad has really had some cool transitions through his life too. But at what point do you start getting does it start to transition? And in addition to those what you're doing personally, you start seeing that there's something going on with your dad and that he needs support. What's that when did you start transitioning into that more that caregiver role? What does that look like?
So about a year after my father was scanned, my wife and I talked about moving to Florida, where we live now, because her whole family had come out here. Her sister came out first with her family, and then
Yeah.
her parents came out here when they retired, and she wanted to be closer to her family. It was a lot of traveling back and forth, right, for
Yeah.
holidays. And so I said, I can only move to Florida if my father will come with us.
Mm.
And so it took about a year, maybe a year and a half, of asking my father periodically, we're thinking of moving to Florida. Would you come with us? He started out with, you know, absolutely not. To eventually he said, sure, why not? And maybe I can live with you and I'll be your butler. I'll do the dishes and cook the food and do the
Yeah.
laundry. And I was like, that sounds like a great plan. But I said to my wife, Margaret, I said, as soon as my father said yes, without hesitation, I knew that there was still something going on, because my father was determined my entire life to never leave Southern California.
Mhm.
Once my father got out of the Marine Corps and he settled in Southern California, he was never going to leave. He was either in LA County, San Diego County, or Ventura County. He
Mhm.
was never going to leave. And so when he said, sure, why not? I was like, okay, something's really not right.
Yeah.
But the moment I knew that I needed to step in was when we got to Florida. When we got to Florida, we had to go to the DMV. They don't call it that here, but we had to go get our, new driver's licenses and
Mhm.
ID cards. And we needed to print out documents that proved that we were residents now.
Mhm.
And so, and all of our stuff hadn't arrived yet. It was en route. So we didn't have our own computers. So we were living in this large condominium complex that had a business center in it. And I said to my dad, hey, let's go down to the business center and we could just use their printers, their computers, and we can print out these documents that we need. I had sent him copies of things that he could print out. And so when we got down there, he started a computer, I started a computer. I wasn't paying any attention to him. I was just moving the mouse around and I was clicking, finding the documents, right? Or opening up my email account, finding the documents, printing them out. I go to the printer, I grab them, and then I go in and stand my dad's computer, and the internet isn't even up. Like where to find his internet, or his Gmail account wasn't even up on the screen. It was
Mhm.
just a blank screen with all the little icons on it
Yeah.
where you have, and he had been working on a laptop with a little pad on it. And when he opened up his pad, his Gmail just popped right open. It was like a Google Chrome
Yeah.
laptop. So
Mhm.
all of a sudden he's on this odd computer. He doesn't know, he couldn't remember how to use a mouse. He didn't remember double click and right click. And so at first I was like, oh yeah, just click on the Chrome icon, Dad. And he was just sort of was frozen.
Mm.
And I pointed to it, and I was like, move the mouse. Or I said, use the mouse to move the little arrow. And he was just struggling with it. And I thought, my father was a computer scientist. You know what I mean? Like, he knew all
Yeah.
about computers. We
Yeah.
had computer stuff in my household when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I was like, something's really strange. And so I helped him with it. I didn't want to take over, but I helped
Mhm.
him do it. And I thought, okay, something is really wrong. And I said to my dad the next day, hey, we're new in town. Let's go register at the local VA clinic, because we need to get new doctors and we need to, get all this stuff, change our address in the system. And so my father got set up with the geriatric team or clinic
Mhm.
at the, or the team at this bigger clinic. And I went to his first appointment with him and told the doctor, this is what's been happening. And they did a mini mental exam, and he didn't do very well on that at all. He didn't know what year it was. He was off by like 25 years.
Mm.
And so they said he probably has dementia, and that's when it really started. But he was living with us. He was fairly independent. My wife and I would go to work, and he was doing his things. He'd go to the gym every morning, and then he'd go into the community area and hang out with the concierge and have some hot chocolate. And then he'd walk across the street and get some lunch. And then he'd come back and he'd watch some YouTube videos of Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like he was just sort of doing his little thing. So he was diagnosed sort of tentatively with dementia in February of 2019. In
Mhm.
September, they sent an occupational therapist from the geriatric team to the home to do an evaluation.
Mhm.
And he couldn't do most things that he needed to do to be safe at home,
Mm.
operate the oven, the taking a shower, getting in and out of the tub kind of thing. And so they said he now needed to go to adult daycare.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but my inbox is always cluttered with useless emails. But there's one I always open: the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver newsletter. You may say, Natalie, what makes yours so special? Well, I'm biased, but don't just take my word for it. Here's what our subscribers say they love. First, it comes once per month, and you can read it in under 5 minutes. Next, you'll find amazing tips and resources to use in your everyday life. And who doesn't love a recommendation? These sisters do, which is why we share sister approved products and discount links to save you time and money. And of course, you're first to know about the upcoming month's confessions. Just like our show, you're guaranteed to relate, be inspired, leave with helpful tips and resources, and of course, laugh. Go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, to sign up for our newsletter today.
Yeah. Were you noticing all these things? I mean, I know that's your background, social work. You and your wife both. But when the occupational therapist came in and he's in your house, do you feel like does he need that extreme help? Or have you not really noticed that he's like, well, I don't think it's safe for dad to be here with, using the oven, or maybe he does need a little extra help? Are you noticing those things? Or are you like, no, he's still okay? Are you avoiding realizing
Good
that,
question,
Zander?
Jay. Are you avoiding?
I wasn't avoiding, but what I have said in the past is I don't like to social work my home,
Okay.
right? I don't like to social work my family. So I
Yeah.
really do take off the social work hat. So I don't look at things through a social work lens
Mhm.
when I'm with my family. I
Mhm.
I I just don't want to do that. And so also, he was on his own during the day. And as far as I knew, he was eating because his food was, he was eating food. He was doing his own laundry.
Mhm.
I could see that he was trimming his nails. He was trimming
Yeah.
his beard. So I could see those things. But what I couldn't see was that he was completely ignoring his feet.
Oh,
And he was always in shoes and socks. And I wasn't seeing that. And when we came home at night, we cooked dinner and we all sat down and ate together. So I didn't see him using an oven. So he was basically making sandwiches and using the microwave.
okay.
But
Mhm.
he was also going to have lunch at a restaurant across or down the street every day.
Yeah.
That was part of his daily
His
routine.
routine. Yeah.
So he was probably eating something very simple for breakfast that was easy for him to do, and then or maybe he was just doing brunch.
Yeah.
I
So
honestly, that's me. Um, honestly, because JJ will never know if I have lost it, and I say lost it in the sense of I start losing my memory and you start getting dementia, Alzheimer's, because I don't cook. So that will not be the trigger for me, because I eat eggs and avocado. If I ever stop, JJ, eating eggs and avocado,
Oh
make a
no.
mental note.
So,
well,
so
and a lot of people don't know that people with dementia in the early stages do masking behaviors
mm,
where they know that something is wrong, so to speak, something is off, but they mask it by doing behaviors and engaging in particular ways, like nodding their head in the like, oh yes, and engaging in conversation like they're able to track what
Yeah.
everybody is saying. So my father was always very conversational, and I noticed that he would just sit and nod a lot and not join in, not interrupt mostly, because that's the Mexican way. We just jump all over the
Yeah.
conversation. And so that was another piece, as I noticed that the way in which he was engaging started to change.
Let me ask you a question. Was it ever, because we've had a couple of people, thinking of Bonnie Chavez, who's of Mexican descent, and it was never a question that she would take care of her parents. Done.
I'm
She
so
would
glad you
never,
asked that question.
she never thought about it. It was like, okay, well, mom and dad need care. I will immediately move them in. Was that kind of how you, and then of course, that's kind of a discussion you have with your spouse, that it was like, okay, we're going. And I know you said if we go to Florida, dad has to go with us. But was it ever something that you said, well, dad's old, he doesn't have any more kids. I'm assuming you don't have siblings, but that's, he'll have to wing it and take care of himself. Was that ever a discussion point for you guys?
Well, so nobody in my family has had dementia.
Mm.
Everybody in my family's had heart disease, and they died in their 50s or 60s.
Okay.
So the fact that my father has lived into his 80s is unusual. He
Mhm.
does have vascular dementia, so his heart got him too,
Mhm.
just in a different way. Because my father was so athletic, he ran 100 marathons and 100 half marathons and 110 Ks, and he crossed the country on an elliptico, which is this cool stand-up bike.
Yes, I've seen
So
them.
he was very physically fit, and so that probably helped him, stave off the heart disease.
Yeah.
But his heart ultimately, had issues. And so when my father said, "I'm going to move in with you," Margaret and I were talking about, like, oh, we'll have a 2-bedroom. He'll have his own bedroom, his own bathroom. And when we're gone during the day, he's going to help out. He's going to dust and vacuum and do the dishes. And he's going to go grocery shop and, all those things, do the laundry. That seemed like a nice thing. We'd still be able to have our life, do our thing. And, we'd take our weekends and go traveling and do the things we want
Right.
to do. We weren't going to, like, all of a sudden start hanging out with him. But that's because we didn't know at the time at what point he was in his progression with his dementia. But within 3 days, when I noticed something's really not right, we did have to have another conversation, because now we have an elderly person with dementia living in our house.
Right.
And everything really changed when COVID lockdowns came, because my dad's adult daycare shut down. I was sent home to work. Margaret was sent home to work. And I know people struggled with having their children in their home doing schoolwork. But could you imagine a 79-year-old who is just aimlessly walking around while you're trying to do work that's supposed to be private, confidential? It was not an easy task to figure out how to manage that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was, it completely changed our lives, because we were told you can't go away and leave him all weekend long anymore. You can't go. You can't go on weekend trips. And we were used to doing that once or twice a month.
Yeah.
Just as a way to take a break from, the work of being a therapist and a social worker. Get a break from.
So I know when COVID hit and everything locked down, and he's there with you all, and you're 24/7, everybody is there together. And you're in each other's space. How does that impact, you're saying you and your wife are not able to get away. Nobody's able to get out of the house. So we're all in that same scenario, but mentally, how is that impacting you, that full-time care? And how long does that last there in the house as everybody's working through COVID? How does that go?
After about 3 months, it was pretty obvious that it was not a good working situation to have him, right? Because the restaurant he went to shut down. The gym in our building shut down. The common areas where he could congregate and have hot chocolate or coffee shut down.
Right.
So all of a sudden Margaret needed a lot more privacy because she is a psychotherapist. So she was my dad had a desk in his room. So she would go into his room to use his desk, and I was at the dining room table, and I wasn't doing psychotherapy, but I still needed, some semblance of privacy and quiet. And we were like, maybe it was a month. Actually, it was God, no, wait, I'm thinking back now. I think it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks into this, the adult daycare program which also operated a very small assisted living house,
Mhm.
they said, we have an open room. Why don't you send your dad here until the curve dies out, right? And or flattens, and you can stay at home and work, and he'll be here, and the VA is going to pay for the daytime and you just pay for the nighttime, right? So they'd still pay for the adult daycare allowance. And I thought that's a great idea. But the problem is, and this will be familiar to people who have done this work or had family members, the decompensation was so rapid from there. So once he was living in a house with 4 or 5 other people with dementia, and he was just in it 24/7. Even though they were working out, they had a recreational therapist that lived in the home. He was still doing his workouts and they were eating good food. But I think he felt lonely and isolated. He didn't know those people. And when you have dementia, it's not like you're all hanging out having conversations with each other.
Yeah.
It's like 5 people in one living space. If let's say they're in the living room or the dining room, they're not talking to each other for the most part. And so it's very isolating because he didn't know any of those people, but he knew me and he knew Margaret well enough that he felt comfortable in that. So he decompensated so rapidly that he's never come home.
So he still lives there at the assisted living?
No,
Or
he's
did
had to
he
go into a
transition?
nursing home.
Okay, so he did go into skilled nursing.
Yeah,
Skilled
he's
facility.
currently on hospice. They started morphine yesterday.
Oh, that
So,
hurts my heart for you.
yeah.
So how long has he been in the skilled nursing?
He went from the assisted living house. He was there for about 6 months, and then I had to move him to an assisted living facility that had more services available.
Yeah.
And so I moved him into that. He was there for about a year. And then that was in Jacksonville, where we were living at the time. We're in Orlando now. And so we came to Orlando. As soon as my dad went into the assisted living facility, we moved to Orlando to be closer to my wife's family, because the driving back and forth was an issue during lockdowns, right? And so I wanted him to get closer to me. So it took a while because they weren't moving people around during the lockdown periods. So I was able to move him to Daytona Beach, which was an hour away instead of 2 hours away where Jacksonville is. And in Daytona Beach, they have one of several Florida State Veterans Affairs nursing homes for veterans. And so I was able to get him in there as a stopping place on the way to the Orlando Veterans Nursing Home that was being developed. And so he was at the Daytona Beach Nursing Home for veterans for about 6 months, and then he moved to the one in Orlando in July of 2022. He was the first resident there. He was like their beta resident. He was on his own for about 6 to 8 weeks. They just kept him there, and they were testing everything out with him, and they've slowly built up there. But when he went into the assisted living facility, he was completely upright. He was able to take walks and still go into the little gym they had and do his workouts. Then he went into the assisted living facility, and he was so much more isolated. It was really because they cut everything out, the events, the activities, the dining room. They shut everything down, and he decompensated. That's where he started to decompensate further, and he fell. And once he fell, then they said you have to have a walker. Then they sent him also to the emergency department and have the hospital look at him. And that's a slippery slope for the elderly once they get sent to the hospital. So, he went from like a walker, and then he kept falling, and then he ended up in a wheelchair while he was doing physical therapy, but it wasn't enough physical therapy. So he was never able to get out of the wheelchair. And then eventually, the last 6 or 7 months, they've been using a machine called a Hoyt machine to lift him out of bed and into his wheelchair and into the shower chair. He's being fed now, spoon fed. So he's lost all of his own physical faculties at this point.
So I want to before we go, Jay, because I see you have a question. I want to steer back just a sec. I like to steer.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about your dad. I want to talk about how this is impacting you and your relationship with your wife. You personally, you first, you and your wife.
So thankfully, because of being introduced at a very young age to mindfulness and meditation and going through these EST trainings as a kid, the basic framework of these was don't be a victim in life. Take
Mm.
responsibility, be accountable, be your word. If anybody's read like the Four Agreements, like those are the kinds of things that are definitely in that were in the S training. S doesn't exist anymore, but it's now called Landmark Forum for people who might know about that.
I did
Um,
read the Four Agreements. It was a little weird, but I liked it.
right? It has really good messages in it. And so because of that, and I think also my social work training and perhaps just my default personality settings, I'm not overly reactionary. So,
Mm.
I'm not an anxious person. I've had moments of feeling anxious, but I don't have an anxiety disorder, right?
Hmm.
I don't have I've been sad in my life, but I've never been depressed. I don't so that I mean, I think I have some things going for me, right? I don't have
Mm.
major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. And so my upbringing, my social work training, it's I think it's been as smooth as it can be in the sense that, I have to simultaneously take care of business because I'm the durable power of attorney and medical
Yeah.
proxy. So I have to take care of all the business entities of his care. And then I go visit him. And when I'm with him, I just put on this hat that says, Your father has dementia. So don't ask him questions like, Do you remember when?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think too often families are trying to pull out, they're trying to extract memories.
Yeah.
And I think it's more for them than it is for their family member
Yeah.
who has dementia or Alzheimer's. And I know not to do that. So I don't do that. I focus more on things like, and I've been through a training, it's called the Dawn Method,
Hmm.
DAWN. I
Hmm.
highly recommend people check out the Dawn Method
Ooh, that sounds like
website.
a
There's also a
resource.
book. Yeah,
Yep.
very good resource. And so I learned from that 8-week training that when a person has dementia, they lose their memories to varying degrees, but they don't necessarily lose until the very end their senses and their emotions, their emotionality. And
Hmm.
so when I'm with my dad now, I might do things like take him on a walk and show him, point out the flower and look at the brilliant orange of the flower, or, oh, can you feel the texture of the flower? Can you hear the birds chirping? I mean, that's a thing about being in Florida. We have so many birds. I love it here.
Hmm.
It's just beautiful. Birds and plants and flowers. And so I take him out. It's like, can you feel the warmth of the sun on your face? So it's like, so I just pivoted. I'm like, I know what to do. And I pivoted. Now, what changed was more recently. More recently, my father's behaviors changed. And I went to go visit him. It was about a month ago. And he was cursing in general. And then he started cursing at me. So I'm not going to say exactly what he said, but he said, F you. He said the whole thing. He said that to me 3 times in a matter of like 1 minute. And then he spit and he took his ball cap off and threw it at me. Because, well, just think about anybody who's parented a child. When you have an infant, a toddler, the only way they know how to register their upsetness is by
Hmm.
spitting out their food and throwing their things. And so he's reverted to that. But I found it so jarring because I got to tell you, I never once in my entire life until that moment heard my father curse. Never, ever. So it was quite jarring. And I was talking to a friend about the experience, and she
Hmm.
said, It sounds like you're experiencing grief. And I went,
Mm.
oh. So I immediately found a grief group and it meets once a month and I've been going and it's an LGBTQ grief group that meets
Hmm.
at a local church because I didn't want to have to explain like we haven't talked about it on the show but I didn't want to have to explain to the grief group people that I'm a trans man, right?
Right.
It was mentioned in my bio, but we haven't really talked about it. And like there's a bunch of nuance that goes into that. It's like when you have a parent with dementia and you're trans, for people you can hear my voice right now, but for people who can't see me, like I have a big beard and I have,
Yes.
no hair on the top of my head. And
Right.
so for all intents and purposes, I look like a man. I'm still female sexed. I'm my father's daughter, but I've been his son, so to speak, for the last almost 20 years. And
Right.
so he's forgotten me twice.
Mm.
right? So I've had to navigate through that, knowing that that was coming. But thankfully, I did find this grief group, and that's been really helpful. And also, there's a caregiver group, but I'll tell you more about that later on.
Because I'm tight now because normally we stop because we've got a handful of minutes left,
But I
and I
want to
want
keep
to
going.
ask keep
Keep going.
questions. Yeah,
I just
keep
want to
going.
say there
Keep
hasn't
going.
been, yeah, there hasn't been any issues in my marriage at all. I'm truly blessed
But
to have Margaret in my life. We've been together 21 years, married for
Mm.
18 of those years, almost 20. I think it's going to be 22 years later this year.
good
Mm.
save.
It's
Good save.
it's been a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And Margaret, like me, she just kind of went with it. Like
Yeah.
your dad's moving in with us, and we're moving to Florida to be my family, and you're bringing your dad with you,
Yeah.
and because it's about family, we're both very committed to our families, and so it's like this is just our new normal now, and we went with it. And my father was with us for 18 months, so we made adjustments, but we haven't fought over it. There hasn't been any tension. I think we gel very well together. We're very compatible, and
Mm.
so I
That's
think
so,
it's
yeah.
works out really well. I'm very
That
thankful.
that's always so, and that's a hard thing, especially in any relationship, but it's so hard in marriages when that common belief of the importance of that care and that relationship when those are on the same page, Xander. Because if they're
Well,
not, if they diverge, then that really is difficult. So the fact that you guys are both going in the same direction, that's a blessing.
That
That
is a
is just
blessing.
I've got to tell you, we're married. Yes, we were
Mhm.
living in the same house with my dad, but I'm the child.
Oh yeah.
I did not ask Margaret to take on any caregiving duties
Yeah.
at all. None,
Mm.
Yeah.
right? I didn't expect her to jump in and do things. She has her own family. She
Right.
has, her father was very sick for a while. He passed away in 2022. So, she was spending time with him, and I would spend time with him too, but she would spend the bulk of time with him alone, and I
Yeah.
was dealing with my dad. So we didn't share responsibilities, and I know some people do that, but you've got to know the person you're with.
Absolutely.
It's not Margaret's forte to be my father's caregiver.
Yeah.
She
Mm.
doesn't know him well enough to do that.
Yeah.
And when he was with us, he was independent in most of his activities of daily living, so he didn't need all the kind of care that he needed once he went into assisted living. But I wouldn't expect Margaret to do even. I mean, she helped cook dinner, and we ate dinner together, and we went
Yeah.
out to the movies together. But I wasn't expecting her to make phone calls or check in on him, and in those ways.
Yeah.
That's important. You mentioned a caregiver group. I want to go back to that and just say, because you said the grief group, because that's like, boom, that was like it feels like a game changer for you a little bit. Like, hey, somebody helped me recognize this. And I think the fact that you had someone to talk to who was far enough away to be able to say, hey, it sounds like you've got some grief. And you said, I'm going to go to a grief group and I'm not going to be intimidated by that. I'm not going to be scared of that. And then you said, but there was also a caregiver group.
Yeah.
So tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Well, just let me mention quickly that grief groups are for people who are dealing with loss of any kind, right? And so when you have a relationship with somebody who has dementia, the relationship as you know it is lost.
Mhm.
It shifts into something new. So it's I think people might feel that it's insensitive to say that there's loss or you're grieving, or you don't do that until they're gone.
Wow.
It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
no, you can do it
You
while
can
they're
do it
still
now.
around.
Absolutely.
It doesn't take anything away from
Mm-mm.
how much you love them or how much you care for them. But yes,
Mhm.
caregiver groups are really interesting. I attended 3 different caregiver groups until I found this one. And for me, what was really important was this one that I finally ended up with.
Mhm.
It's all men. So male caregivers, most of them had wives with dementia. There were only a couple of us who had a parent, but it was mostly men who had wives with dementia. When I went to these other caregiver groups, they were led by women. They were attended by exclusively women, except for me, and they were pretty condescending. They'd be like, "Oh, where's your mother?" How about your sisters? Is your wife taking care of your dad? It's be like, no, I'm the child.
Mm.
I'm doing it. And they'd be like, oh, that's so wonderful. And it was just something that
Oh, yeah.
I didn't find it to be
Oh,
supportive at
it's like
all.
reverse
Yeah.
sexism.
Well, yes, it was very interesting because I just wasn't taken. I don't know. It wasn't. I can't say I wasn't taken as seriously. That's not really the right framework for this. But it's as if I was still just on the sidelines of caregiving. I
Yeah.
wasn't really a caregiver. I'm like, no, my father's living in my home.
Yeah.
I'm the legal person for all of his financial and medical decisions.
Yeah.
The same as you.
Yeah.
But then when I found this all men's, excuse me, when I found this men's support group, caregiver support group, I walked into it. There were like 30 guys in it. They meet once a month in person, once a month on Zoom. It's local here in Orlando. It's wonderful. It's just, and there are these men who their wives have passed, and they still come because they want to be available for the men who
Mm.
were just entering into the grief,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
grief that comes when you're in your golden years and you can't live them how you thought you were going to live them. And you don't want to put your wife in a nursing home because it's terrible. It's the last thing. And these older men, these wiser older men say, that's what I thought too. But my wife actually thrived in the nursing home
Yeah.
because she was doing activities and events and making friends, keeping her at home and having it's like it was the opposite of what people think. Like, no, there actually are opportunities for their spouses
Yeah.
to thrive. And so
Yeah.
they're able to support each other. And even though my situation is different, mine's a dad instead of a wife, it's a wonderful group of men, very loving, very kind. Yeah, wonderful group.
Xander, I'm so glad you called that out, though, that
Me too.
finding a group that fits who you are is
Yeah.
so important because same thing for us, we're caring for a mom. It's very hard for us to sit in a group or listen to the story of a woman caring for a husband. It's totally different. But I don't think the male caregiver is given enough credit. And we talk about this because when you look at the numbers, there are all these females, and the majority of them, they're females. But I think there's so many men that don't identify. There's so many people that don't identify, but so many men that don't think about it because men traditionally they've done the salary. I know this is a traditional view, but they've done the salary and they brought home the bacon or whatever that is, all that cliche stuff, but they don't identify as it. And we love talking to male caregivers because the feelings and I guess there's just so much more to it. There's so much depth to it, but it's not recognized and there's not enough information out there to share. And so if you're another male caregiver out there, you need to know that it's okay that, you're caring for your dad or whomever you're caring for. You're okay to not be okay. That
Well,
it's hard.
and you're going to have thoughts and feelings and emotions that are going to fit. You're going to feel lonely too. And it's okay. Like, it's like you have permission. These are all normal things you're going to feel, but society makes it hard because of traditional role expectations and what
Yeah.
is expected. And so, gosh, man. Okay, Zander. So we're going to have you come back. Like, I love you. I want you to come back because there is so much more that I want to talk about. Right. And so I have one last burning question. Because we normally do sister questions, but man, you are just juicy, like all kinds of great info for us. And I have so appreciated this conversation. There's always the one question I want to ask, and I'm selfish and I'm going to do it. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? I know it sounds crazy after we've been talking about all kinds of serious stuff, but what is the one thing that is just for you that you do for you?
I take walks and listen to podcasts. It's
Oh.
my time I just put in the earbuds, I turn on a great podcast, and I go for a 3 to 5 mile walk around a beautiful lake
Mm.
in my neighborhood.
I think that's something he learned early on. It's like, it's me time, back off.
For everyone listening, it's kind of like, or watching us, because this is so much fun. I always recommend people watch us on YouTube, because then you really see our facial expressions, and JJ and I are like, and so, but I think, it started, your dad gave you that gift in childhood. It's really that regulating, I think that's a gift that you were exposed to so much, and things that help with regulating. So I think there's so many things, and then all the things you've learned, but that you're so mindful to apply them to your everyday life. And you have Margaret, who, we love you, Margaret, because Margaret is also probably a very calming, regulating, balancing
rock.
Absolutely.
I do want to say that there are a lot of resources that Zander has brought to us. There are also a lot of organizations that he works with, that he speaks with, and we definitely will have those in the show notes, because we want you, everybody, all listeners, to be able to find those resources, Zander, that really weren't available when you needed to be able to grab them fast. But Zander, he has to come back.
Oh, without question. I already know he's coming back, because we have so much more to dig into. We really are Oprah. Thanks, Oprah.
I would love it. I had a great time, and I'm definitely looking forward to coming back.
Wonderful. All right, guys, thank you so much. And until we confess again.